One evening she was gone to draw the cider, and she happened to look up at the ceiling where she saw an axe stuck in one of the beams. It must have been there for a long time, but somehow or other she had never noticed it before, and she began to think. She thought it was very dangerous to have an axe there, and she said to herself, "Suppose my sweetheart and I were to get married and we had a son, and he grew up and came down to the cellar to draw the cider, and the axe were to fall on his head, what a dreadful thing that would be." She sat down and began to cry. Upstairs they began to wonder why she was so long drawing the cider. So her mother went to look for her and found her sitting in the cellar. The cider was running all over the floor. "Why, whatever is the matter?" asked her mother. "Oh, mother," she said, "look at the horrid axe. Suppose my sweetheart and I were to be married and we had a son, and he grew up and came down to the cellar to draw the cider, and the axe were to fall on his head. What a dreadful thing that would be. Dear, dear, what a dreadful thing that would be," said the mother, and she sat down by her daughter and started to cry too. After a bit, the father began to wonder what was keeping them so long, so he went to the cellar to look for them himself. There sat his wife and his daughter crying. The cider was running all over the floor. "Whatever is the matter?" he asked. "Why," said the mother, "look at that horrid axe. Just suppose our daughter and her sweetheart were to be married and have a son, and he grew up and came down to the cellar to draw the cider, and the axe were to fall on his head. What a dreadful thing that would be. Dear, dear, dear." "So it would," said the father, and he sat down beside them and started crying.
Wait, but did the axe fall on his head?
No, they're just thinking that it could. Now, the young man got tired of waiting up in the kitchen by himself, and at last he went down to the cellar too. There sat his sweetheart and her parents crying side by side. The cider was running all over the floor. He marched over and turned off the tap. Then he said, "Whatever are the three of you doing sitting here crying and letting the cider run all over the floor?" "Oh," said the father, "look at that horrid axe. Suppose you and our daughter were to be married and have a son, and he grew up and came down to the cellar to draw the cider, and the axe were to fall on his head. What a dreadful thing that would be." But the young man burst out laughing. He reached up and pulled out the axe. Then he said, I've traveled many miles, and I've never before met three such big sillies as you three. Now, I shall start out on my travels again. When I can find three bigger sillies than you three, I'll come back and marry your daughter." He wished them goodbye and started on his journey, leaving them all crying because the daughter lost her sweetheart. And then he traveled. The young man traveled a long way. So long he went to Paris.
And then he got that weird toothbrush holder.
Where? Yeah, weird toothbrush. Oh, yeah.
It only has...
All right. We'll continue this later on.